we also have, I think that's disallow. So on delete, disallow. So basically that basically means that we are not going to allow delete operations if we are referencing another account. So we can also specify those behaviors on update behaviors as well. So if I'm updating something there, we can also specify those things. And now you would notice that our entire data definition is growing larger and larger by the minute, right? So we would have an on delete cascade on up. So delete whenever perform the cascade delete operations whenever an account is deleted, or if an account is updated, what to do in terms of that. So on update, maybe set null, things like that, right? So we can tack on more and more constraints on top of that, and more and more behaviors on top. Okay, any questions about this? Does it make sense why we would need to delete the depositor relation first before we delete the account relation or the account tuple? Does this part make sense? Like why deletion would be necessary, or are you guys lost? Make sense? Any questions about this part? Fairly easy, right? Okay. Okay, so let's move on to the next part of our lecture. So we talked about not null constraints, we talked about check constraints, primary keys, foreign keys, and unique constraints. We also talked about the impact of null values for foreign keys and unique values. And we also talked about how we just talked about how automatic resolution of constraint violations can be performed, right? We can disallow or we can delete depending upon the requirements. The delete operation or delete on cascade would have worked for the bank database, but it might, and you can think of a case where on delete cascade won't be suitable for other cases, right? So we won't want to delete that particular information, or maybe instead just set some default value, something like that. So it depends upon the use case of your problem, and then you would design your database like that. We have not had any homework assignments that actually ask you to design these databases or these schemas yet, but we would have that from assignments 3, 4, I believe. Essentially, we talked about these things. So the next set of slides that we are going to look at is basically uh, data definition constraints continued, so to speak. We will talk about some more things and some other things that just I couldn't tack on in those set of slides. These are going to be a mixed bunch of other information that you would need, so to speak. So this is just a bit on there. Okay, so I said that we can assign constraints names. So we basically what we can do is basically specify constraint name, and then the expression for that constraint, right? So up to now we were just saying primary key is employee ID, but we can then assign a name to that, basically saying constraint employee underscore PK. That is the name of our constraint, and primary key is employee ID, constraint employee SSN check, unique employee SSN, manager foreign key references employee, and so on, right? If we do not specify names for our constraints, your database system would actually assign names for you, and they specify quite meaningful names to those constraints, but it might be useful for referring to specific constraints by names, and we will talk about this next. So okay, so imagine the case where basically, let's say that you have some table and have some schema where you have the user's name, maybe the user's address, and maybe let's say that's that user's name and the user's address. And let's say that you are trying to access or trying to insert those values into your table, but you have multiple queries or multiple insert operations that are actually doing it. So first, let's say that you're just going to insert the user's name. And if you imagine the case where the user is submitting information in some web form, right? And you can imagine the case where the first form just asks for user information and the next form maybe asks for address details and things like that. So once you submit the first form, you go to the next form, and this form acts like the midway point between the user and the data that we have. So you can say that uh, the user name and all of those other user information, let's say some user information, gets populated into the table first. Followed by that, the user provides its address, which is another insert operation or an update operation on that tuple. So we can imagine a case like that. If that is the case, and we have like a constraint on our table that says address can't be null. Well, if I'm going to insert the username first, I have to set the address to null, right? I have to set the address to null, and then followed by that, once the user actually gives me the address, then I can populate that address as well. So sometimes it is necessary to perform a temporary constraint violation where for some time, at least the entire set of instructions are completed. We would withhold any constraint checks. And once the entire set of instructions are completed, only then we would be checking our constraints. These are also called transactions, where basically transactions are a sequence of instructions that we want to perform on our table. But these sequence of instructions would be considered as a single unit. So all or nothing kind of thing. So that also helps us to say that, okay, perform this transaction, and this is not your monetary transaction. This is essentially like a database transaction where, and it is used very much in terms of monetary transactions. But essentially, if we want, we can actually execute this entire sequence of instructions, and then we say that, okay, after this, make your check constraints. The main reason for doing this is, you can imagine, let's say that the user's internet service got dropped right before he was able to submit the address. And then basically you had half the set of instructions that we wanted to perform, like insert username and things like that. And we did not complete the address part. So transactions is something that we won't talk about in this class. At least we will talk about that in the very end of this class, maybe. But essentially, these allow us to say that it's an all or nothing sort of scenario where either all instructions are executed or none of them are. So if the user stops interacting with the database midway through, we can just unroll that entire set of instructions and go back to the previous state, right? So in such scenarios, you can also imagine that if we have multiple insert statements or multiple queries, we would like to defer those constraints or defer the constraint enforcement for a bit later, right? Okay, so there are different types. By default, your constraints are non-deferable, and we can specify what constraints are deferable and what constraints are not deferable by using these keywords. So we, for deferable constraints, we have initially immediate. So basically that also means that it is going to be applied immediately, or initially default, or sorry, initially deferred. That means that your constraint is going to be applied at the end of the transaction, not during and not before. It is going to be applied after we have completed that entire transaction. Okay, so this is where stating names for your constraints is quite useful, because now we can say that set constraints, and you have your constraint names, C1, C2, your not nulls, your primary keys, or what have you. So these constraints are going to be deferred, right? And these set of deferred constraints are also useful when we are talking about altering a table or updating a table, right? So we want to alter a table, maybe attribute by attribute. And for that, we have not talked about alter table yet, but essentially we will talk about it. But essentially, if we want to change the schema of a table, we want to be able to defer the constraints. Right? So for example, let's say that we are porting an entire table into another table, maybe adding some more constraints to it, or removing some old constraints from that table and then reorienting that table, or adding new attributes to it, right? So if we want to copy over a table into a new table, we would really want to defer those constraints before we have set up the new table, right? So before we set it up, we can say that defer all constraints, copy over all the data, and then reinforce all the constraints back again. right? So that is something that we will talk about. So alter, we will talk about altered table in a second, but essentially that was for deferred constraints. Okay, so any questions about this part? Okay. Okay, so the next thing that we would want to talk about is, let's talk about, and as I said, it's a hodgepodge of information in this set of slides, but just um, take a note of it. Um, so now let's talk about date and time values. We have looked at the domain type, that was date and time, and let's just have some more information on this particular thing. So we can have types that are basically date. So we can have an attribute of type date that records the date of a particular thing or event. It is basically a calendar date, which would include your year, month, and the day of month. Um, there are, again, remember that different databases allow, so there are two types of dates, right? One is the Julian calendar, one is the Gregorian calendar, right? So sometime in the 1600s, 1500s, 1500s, so, we changed from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar. Yes, so we changed to the Gregorian calendar, and basically that had like a month or 2 months off from one calendar to the other. So I really hope that you guys don't need to worry about databases that work with those old dates, but that should be a fun little thing. But essentially, we need to keep that in mind as well. But essentially, the date constraint um, gives you the year, gives you the ability to specify the year, month, and the day of the month, right? Similarly, we also have the time, the time attribute. So that includes hour, minutes, and second values. Usually the time attribute does not allow microseconds, but sometimes some tables allow, or some database systems allow milliseconds, but they don't allow microseconds. But if we do want fractional seconds, we can specify the number of digits that we want using a parameter like this. So time p, usually by default that ends up being 6, but you can set the precision for that as well. But this can be used to like specify the milliseconds or the microseconds if you so want to record those as well. I have never seen a case where I would want a database to maintain microsecond values, but then again, these days are for Bitcoins, so they might use those things as well, right? Okay. We can also include time zones for our tables or for those attributes as well. So we just say time with time zone, that includes the time zone as well, and that also deals with daylight savings time issues as well. So if we say time with time zone, it includes the time, or additionally it would also say that this is the time zone. So if I'm inserting some data here, it would say blah 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 6:19 p.m. whatever number of seconds CST, because that is the time zone for Kansas, right? Okay. Now we can also have time P with time zone. So this would be an interesting way to, and I say interesting, but it's not, but this would be a way to store your